Hey there friends, welcome to my channel where I share spine-chilling tales from the dark web, all while you listen to the soothing sound of rain. If you love a good scare and want to hear about some truly eerie experiences, you're in for a treat. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below telling me where you're listening from. I have something special just for you, so be sure to click the link in the description below to learn more. Get cozy and ready because this story is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. I remember the first time I stumbled upon the dark web. It was like a hidden world behind a veil of shadows. I was just sitting in my room browsing the internet like anyone else. But then, curiosity got the best of me. I clicked on a link that promised secrets about the unknown. My heart raced as I clicked deeper and deeper into this strange place. I felt both excited and scared. One night, when the rain pounded against my window, I found myself lost in this world again. The sound of raindrops made everything more intense. Every little noise outside was amplified. I sat there, staring at my screen as a chilling story unfolded in front of me. It was about a person who found a video that showed everything awful in life. I leaned in closer, the light from the screen flickering in the dark room. I couldn't believe my eyes as I watched the images flash before me. The video began with a warning. It said things might be disturbing. My heart sank, but I couldn't look away. I felt my pulse quicken as the first scene appeared. It was a dark alley. There were flickering streetlights, and I could see a shadowy figure lurking in the background. I felt the chill of fear creep up my spine. The figure was all alone, waiting. I wondered what would happen next. As the video went on, strange things started to happen. People walked down that alley and never came back. The unsettling images made my stomach twist. I suddenly felt like someone was watching me, and I glanced around my room. The rain fell harder outside, each drop sounding like a whisper. Then the video shifted to something else. It showed an abandoned house. They said that people who went in never came out. Legends told of strange noises coming from inside. I felt myself being pulled in, imagining what it would be like to stand in front of that eerie building. I could almost hear the creaking of the floorboards as I visualized stepping inside. My heart raced even more. As I watched, a figure appeared in the window of the abandoned house. It looked just like a person, but something was off. I couldn't tell if it was a shadow or a ghostly shape. My breath hitched in my throat. What if it saw me looking? What if it wanted to come out? The rain continued to drum against the roof, making the whole thing feel more real. The video cut to someone sitting in front of that house, trying to gather the courage to go inside. I could feel their fear. They started to step forward, but then I heard a loud bang from outside my window. I jumped, my heart pounding. Was someone out there? I paused the video, looking around my room again, feeling little and scared. When I clicked play again, the person was inside the house now. They flicked on a flashlight, and beams of light danced off the walls covered in dust. The atmosphere was so thick with tension. I was gripped by the thought of what might be lurking in the corners. It felt as if the shadows were alive, ready to pounce. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the video, and I gasped. The person turned and pointed the flashlight toward the noise. My heart was racing as I imagined what could be hiding in the dark. The rain was falling in torrents outside, and I felt like it was mocking my fear, each drop pulling me deeper into the unease. Just as the person was about to leave the room, something surged through the shadows. I thought I could see faint eyes glowing. My spine tingled with dread. Where was I? I suddenly felt so small, like I was part of this horrifying world. The rain kept pouring, echoing the pounding of my heart. I couldn't find the courage to turn off the video. Instead, I moved closer to the screen, trying to focus on what would happen next. As the person ran out of the room, the camera shook and I felt dizzy. Whatever was chasing them felt so real to me. With every second that passed, the tension only grew. I was glued to my seat, watching the chaos unfold. I imagined what it would feel like to be trapped like they were, the sense of panic clawing at my skin. I felt the urge to scream, but I held it in, caught in this web of fear. Then the video came to an end abruptly, leaving me in silence. I stared blankly at the screen, feeling the weight of the darkness seep into my thoughts. The rain continued to pour outside, but in the quiet, I was even more aware of the creaks in my house, the whispers of something unsettling lurking beyond my sight. I knew this would stick with me. I closed my laptop, but part of me still felt trapped in that strange world. Even as I crawled into bed, I couldn't shake the images from my mind. The shadows outside seemed to loom larger, and I imagined faint whispers calling from the darkness. Days passed, but I couldn't forget what I had seen. I'd tell myself it was just a video, nothing more, yet every time I heard rain hit the window, my stomach would twist into knots. I tried to push it aside, but I could never fully relax. I kept glancing over my shoulder, feeling like something just beyond my view knew my fear. Then one night I thought I'd be brave. I opened my laptop again. This time I wanted to find out more about that video. I searched the names and places I had seen, hoping to ease my mind. But every page led me deeper into stories that chilled me to my bones. I found tales of others who had watched the same video and had strange experiences afterward. Some said they started to see shadows moving in their homes, while others felt cold spots in their rooms. The more I read, the more paranoid I became. I could feel the walls closing in as if my own home was not as safe as I thought. I tried to ignore it and focus on something else, but that night it rained again. I lay in bed, wide awake, the sound of drops echoing all around. My heart raced, pushing me to check the windows, the doors, and even the closet. Nothing felt right. Every little noise seemed too loud. The darkness in the room felt thick enough to cut with a knife. And then I saw it. A flash outside my window. My breath caught in my throat as I stilled, straining to see what it was. It was just for a moment, but I swore I saw a figure in the rain, maybe just beyond the trees. I shoved my blanket over my head, hoping it was just my imagination. But I couldn't shake off the dread. As days turned into weeks, I tried to reassure myself that it was all just a scary story. Yet, at night, the rain stirred up those memories, pulling me back into that haunting moment. I began to dread those rain-soaked evenings, every shadow becoming a potential threat. Eventually, I decided I had to confront my fear. I thought about heading back to where I had found those stories. Maybe understanding the source would help clear the dark thoughts from my mind. It was a silly idea, but I felt like I was slowly losing my grip on reality. On another rainy night, I sat back down at my laptop. I revisited that eerie video, ready to watch it again. But now it was different. This time, I was prepared for the shadows and the panic. I told myself there was nothing to fear. It was just a video after all. Yet as I watched, I couldn't shake the feeling something was watching me. My heart raced anew as the first scene unfolded. I could almost hear the echoes of the haunted house as the screen lit up. The tension hung in the air, thick enough to touch. I remembered each moment vividly as I watched the person step into the house again. I hoped for a different outcome, but it's the same shadows lurking in the corners. The rain outside was relentless now, pouring in sheets. Just as the deep laughter echoed from the video, something in my room caught my attention. A faint sound, not from the screen but from somewhere else. Was it just the wind? Or something altogether different? The warm glow of the laptop screen illuminated my fears, making the shadows seem to twinkle with life. I felt utterly alone and I knew I had to stop, but I was glued to the screen. Suddenly the video cut off. Just like before, the abrupt silence made everything feel heavier. My heart thudded in my chest, and the shadows around my room seemed to close in. Days fled by with the storms. The rain became a constant reminder, always dragging me back to that haunted journey. I found myself looking over my shoulder more often, feeling the urge to hide whenever darkness fell. At one point, I thought I could share my experience with friends. But when I told them about the video and what I had seen, they laughed, brushing it off as just a funny story. I wanted to shake them and show them how real it felt, but I held back. One friend did agree to watch the video, thinking it was nothing. I felt a mix of fear and relief. I didn't want to feel alone in this. But when it was over, their laughter faded into concern. "You need to stop watching these things," they said. But it was too late for me. The shadows had already crept in. With time, I tried to focus on other things, but my heart would skip every rainy night. The sound of drops tapping on the window became a haunting melody, echoing the fear I carried deep inside. I couldn't understand why I felt this way or how to break free. My nights filled with restless sleep, brief moments of peace haunted by dreams of dark figures watching me. I often woke up to the echo of laughter in my mind, sitting up panicking, searching for signs of life in my dark room. Yet nothing was ever there, just shadows waiting for the dawn. And then came the night when the rain poured harder than before. The sound turned oppressive, drowning everything out. I found myself staring at the window, heart racing at the thought that I was waking nightmares of rain-soaked memories. I sat up, clutching my knees to my chest, whispering to myself that it was all in my head. But just as I gathered my courage to sleep, I heard it, a soft knock. I froze, blood running cold. I blinked into the darkness. Surely it was just the wind, I told myself. But as I strained to listen, that knock came again, more insistent this time. My heart thudded against my ribs, and I could feel the dread wash over me like icy rain. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to convince myself it was nothing, yet the fear bubbled up until I could hardly breathe. The rhythm of the rain outside fell into sync with my heartbeat. I looked to the corner, where the shadows seemed to dance in the candlelight. My mind raced, fighting between the urge to run or to stay still and quiet. It felt like something was waiting just outside my view. Panic exploding in me like a storm, I finally threw off the blanket and crept toward the door. I wanted to run out and escape, but I felt frozen. The rain outside crashed louder, almost drowning out the knock. Then I saw it in the reflection. A faint outline, like a dark figure standing just outside, obscured by the droplets sliding down the glass. I gasped again, stumbling backward, heart pounding harder than ever as I hurriedly stumbled back to my bed, falling into the covers. Was I losing my mind? Or had that video truly opened a door to something dark? Every frightening thought clawed at me, and I held my breath, waiting for the next knock, the next sound, the next shadow to invade my thoughts. The rain kept pouring, and outside, the feeling of being watched never faded away. In that moment, I knew there was no escape. I would always be linked to that eerie place, that dark world that called to me in the silence. It haunted me in my dreams, always lurking just beyond the veil of light. There would be no explanation, only the terror of what lay waiting. I chose to keep the stories flowing, even if they filled my nights with dread. Would there be a way to find peace? Or was I destined to wander this realm, a shadow among shadows? And as the rain continued its relentless rhythm against the roof, the answers escaped me, just like the figures blending into the darkness outside. And I could only sit, body trembling under the covers, losing myself among the shadows. I felt those dark shapes everywhere in my room, creeping closer. The rain continued to crash against my window, turning into a haunting melody that echoed the fear in my chest. I tried to focus on the sound, calming myself, letting it wash over me like a warm blanket. But every time I closed my eyes, visions of that figure outside invaded my thoughts. It felt like it was watching me, waiting for the right moment to come in. Then suddenly, a flash of lightning illuminated my room. In that quick instant, I thought I saw something move by the edge of the window, a silhouette just outside the curtain. I held my breath, straining to see if it was real or just my mind playing tricks on me. When the thunder rolled, it shook the very foundation of my house, rattling the windows with a sound like a monstrous roar. I felt the fear climb up my throat, making it hard to breathe. A surge of adrenaline coursed through me, and I thought about jumping out of bed to investigate. I wanted to prove to myself that I was just imagining things. But my body felt glued to the mattress, paralyzed by fear. The rain picked up, becoming a torrential downpour. Each drop felt like a heartbeat echoing through the walls. I could hear strange sounds merging with the rain, soft whispers that seemed to come from inside the house. I blinked in confusion and listened carefully. Were they real? Or was my fear creating shadows that whispered secrets I couldn't understand? I finally summoned the courage to sit up and look around my room. Everything appeared normal, but I could feel something lurking just beyond the light. Then gradually, I turned to the window, my heart pounding louder than the storm outside. And that's when I caught sight of it again. A figure standing just outside, partially hidden by the dripping rain. It wasn't just a trick of the light. I could make out the outline of someone as if they were trying to get in. I fell back against the bed, pulling the covers tightly around me. The figure looked distorted, like it wasn't fully formed. My mind raced as I fumbled for my phone, wanting to call someone, anyone to tell them what was happening. But what was I going to say? There's a spooky shadow outside? I chuckled nervously, shaking my head. The laughter turned into a terrified gasp as the figure moved closer to the glass, standing right by the edge of my window. I could see the silhouette of a face, a pale, drawn face that sent chills racing down my spine. Its eyes seemed hollow, dark like the depth of a tunnel. They bore into me like a predatory animal. Suddenly, it raised a hand and pressed it against the glass. I felt frozen in place. The bony fingers rested there, wet from the rain, smearing water across. The pain like a ghost reaching out. I wanted to scream, to cry, but the sound was stuck in my throat. I could barely breathe as I backed away from the window, the shadows around me expanding with my fear. It felt like time had stopped, the world outside turning unreal as I sank deeper into that moment. Then just like that, it vanished. One blink and the figure was gone, like smoke in the wind, leaving only the sound of rain hammering against the glass. I felt a surge of relief wash over me, but it quickly twisted into dread when I realized that the shadow was still there, just hidden in the rain. I wanted to look away to check if it was real. So I forced myself to breathe and tried to convince myself it was fine, that my mind was just playing tricks. But then another lightning bolt lit up the room and I jumped, my heart racing again. I turned, unable to help myself, half expecting the figure to be back. And there it was, standing not outside anymore but in my room now, right beside the door. I blinked hard, willing my mind to clear, but it only became worse. The figure stood still, almost blending with the shadows, yet I could see the outline clearer now. I squeezed my eyes shut and opened them again, hoping it would disappear. But it stayed watching me. Its head tilted slightly as if it was studying me, waiting for me to make a move. In that moment, panic gripped me, a breathless urge to run, to hide. But my limbs felt heavy, weighted down by terror. I couldn't tear myself away from that being. I was trapped in its gaze. My heart thumped loudly, drowning out everything, and I felt the darkness pressing in closer, as if it were alive. As the storm rumbled outside, the figure moved a little closer, stepping into the feeble light from my bedside lamp. I was frozen, unable to take my eyes off it. The face was clearer now, full of marks and a look that was not human. "Who are you?" I croaked, finally pushing the words out, my voice shaking like the leaves in the wind. But it didn't answer. Instead, it raised its finger to its lips, silently urging me to be quiet. My heart raced faster. I wanted to scream, but I felt paralyzed by its presence. The rain intensified outside, and I could feel every drop echoing into the silence between us. Then suddenly it grinned. An unnaturally wide smile spread across its face, revealing teeth that were far too sharp, and I felt my breath hitch. Fear coursed through me, crawling under my skin like 1,000 ants. The figure stepped even closer, reaching out. I instinctively flinched and clutched the blanket tighter, trying to make myself smaller, invisible. But it hardly seemed to notice. Its eyes remained locked on me, glinting with something dark. With a soft whisper, it finally broke the silence. "I've been waiting for you." Those words sent chills down my spine. I didn't understand what it meant. I wanted to ask, but the words wouldn't come. The reality of its presence in my room felt more insane than anything else. I was sure I was dreaming. But no, I was wide awake. I was alive. Before I could gather my wits, the being took another step, and the moment felt thick around us. I heard a creaking noise from the floorboards beneath it, as if my fear was making the whole house tremble. Out of nowhere, I remembered the stories I had read about things like this. I had learned that the shadows draw strength from fear. And in my heart, I felt like I was giving it all the power it needed. Just then, a thunderclap rang out, louder than anything I had ever heard, and for a brief moment, the lights flickered. The figure stumbled back slightly, momentarily taken off guard. It was an opportunity one could not waste. I pushed myself up and dashed for the light switch, fumbling in the darkness. My fingers brushed against the wall, tense and shaking, until finally I found it and flipped it on. The flood of light burst into the room, illuminating every corner and banishing the darker corners of my mind. To my horror, the being recoiled at the brightness, fading slowly into a blurry shadow, but then it looked back at me, its smile somehow even wider and more haunting under the bright light. "You can't escape from me," it hissed, its voice sharp like glass, chilling me to the bone. I took a shaky step back, desire to flee bubbling up again. It lingered there, half-formed in the light, and I felt my pulse thunder in my ears. Could I really outrun whatever this was? The storm continued to rage outside, the rain flooding my thoughts with memories of every fear I had ever had. It played like a reel in my mind, reminding me of dark corners, hidden shapes, and the weight of fear pressing in closer. I tried to gather courage to confront whatever horror stood before me. "Get out!" I shouted, the words trembling with fear and desperation. "You don't belong here." Its grin faltered for just a second, and I thought I saw a flicker of rage behind its hollow eyes. But then, like the storm before it, the anger washed over, transforming back into an unsettling calm. "I belong to the shadows just like you do," it replied, stepping just a little closer, seeming to glide across the floor without a sound. "You are not alone." The fear surged again, and I realized this being held secrets that tied back to that video, the dark things I had unleashed by even watching. I needed to act. My mind raced, searching for a way out. With every ounce of bravery I could muster, I took a deep breath and yelled, "No." The shadows shifted, swirling around the figure as the air in the room grew thick. "You cannot deny what you are," it whispered again, its voice echoing around me like a dark lullaby. I didn't want to listen anymore. I rushed back to the window, and instead of backing down, I pulled back the curtain. Rain poured in, splattering across my face. I welcomed the cold water. It felt real, grounding me. "Leave me alone," I shouted, determination surging inside me. I ripped open the window, splashing rain everywhere. "Tonight belongs to me," it called, its voice filled with an unsettling mix of amusement and anger. "You cannot escape what you've created." I stared into the rain, my heart thumping wildly, and for the first time I felt less afraid. There was something about fighting back that ignited a small flicker of courage inside me. As I looked back at the figure, It seemed to shift and swirl, barely formed as if the light was eating it alive. I felt the warmth of rain on my skin, washing away the sensation of dread. In a moment of clarity, I remembered those stories I had read, knowing fear would not hold me hostage. I took a step forward, pointing at the figure and leaning out into the storm, feeling one with the rain. "You don't control me. You don't win," I yelled. The being hissed in response, its form growing distorted and angrier. Then, to my horror, it lunged forward, a wave of darkness reaching out like a hand grasping for me. I ducked back, nearly stumbling over myself, losing my balance for just a heartbeat. The world felt like it was tipping on its axis, shadows against shadows as I felt the energy shift in the room. Despite my fear, I watched as that reaching darkness began to disintegrate, breaking apart in the light, dissolving into the air like smoke caught in a gust. "This isn't over," it shrieked, the voice swallowed by the sound of the storm. The wind howled through the open window, strong and fierce as if reminding me of the power I had within that moment. But I didn't back down. With each word I shattered its power. "You have no hold on me," I shouted again, pushing my arms out as if parting a sea of shadows. The figure flickered, then burst into shadows that scattered like leaves in a windstorm, dispersing until only the whispers remained. I felt lighter, as if the weight of fear had been lifted. Yet even in that moment of victory, I knew something lingered in the depths of darkness. I could feel its presence like a scar on my soul. With a deep breath, I let the rain cleanse away the last traces of that encounter, washing away the horror of what I had faced. I felt renewed, as if the storm had come to reclaim my spirit in the turbulence. But as I gazed out into the night, I realized that the storm may fade, but the shadows would always remain. The story was far from over. I closed the window and returned to bed, heart still racing, feeling the aftershock of the encounter. As exhaustion began to creep in, I wondered what would happen next, what other things lay in wait for me in the night. I had stared into the depths of fear and confronted the darkness, but I knew deep down the darkness would return, possibly stronger than before, ready to engulf me once again. The rain slowed, but I understood it was only the calm before another storm. I closed my eyes, feeling sleep begin to take hold, but something nagged at me. I couldn't shake the lingering dread or the feeling that my actions had awakened something far more sinister. As I drifted off, I heard one last whisper floating through the room, echoing softly, "I will be back." And in that moment, as the world faded to black, I realized that the shadows weren't done with me. They would always watch and wait, ready for the next stormy night. But the night passed, and when morning arrived, the sun peeked tentatively through the curtain. Light spilled into my room, lifting the heavy veil of fear that had crept in during the dark hours. As I sat up in bed, I could almost convince myself that it had all been a nightmare, a figment born from too much fear and too little sleep. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the remnants of the cold grip of panic. I moved to the window, pulling the curtains aside to let the sunlight pour in. The storm had passed, leaving behind a glistening world, where everything looked fresh and new. But as I gazed out at the neighborhood bathed in sunlight, my heart began to race again. The air felt different, almost electric, stirring with an undercurrent that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I scanned the street, my instincts screaming at me to look closer. I squinted, searching for any sign of the dark figure. But the streets were empty, nothing but bright colors and chirping birds. Yet, I knew better. I could feel something lurking just beyond my sight. Deciding to shake off the uneasy feeling, I went through my morning routine, but every sound felt amplified. The clatter of dishes echoed harshly in my ears, and the normal buzz of my family felt too loud, too bright. I forced myself to eat breakfast, trying to blend in, but I couldn't shake the thoughts of the night before. That figure, those shadows, the whisper that lingered in my mind, I had to know more. After breakfast, I considered calling my friend, the one who had watched the video with me. I needed to talk to someone who understood the depths of what I was feeling. I grabbed my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. Just as I was about to dial, the sudden memory hit me. The video. My heart dropped as I recalled the last time I had viewed it. I hadn't seen it again after the events that unfolded. But I was drawn to it now, an unwanted compulsion swirling in my mind. With shaky hands, I pulled up the video on my phone, my heart pounding loudly in my ears. Just the sight of the thumbnail sent a jolt of fear coursing through me. I almost threw it away but compelled myself to press play. The screen flickered to life and I felt the same thrill of terror I had felt before. The familiar images flashed before my eyes, the eerie sounds sending chills racing down my spine. But this time something felt different. It wasn't just a ghostly flicker of haunting images. It felt alive, as if it had a pulse, a heartbeat that matched my own. I barely made it halfway through when I heard a low murmur rising from the speakers, growing louder, wrapping around me. "Come find me." It wasn't the video making those sounds, it was like a voice cutting through the room, the very air vibrating around me. I felt a tightness in my chest, panic rising as the reality of what I was hearing sank in. I gripped the phone tight, wanting to throw it across the room. But I just couldn't let go. I was drawn in, held captive by those words echoing in my mind. Suddenly, the figure from the video materialized in front of the screen, and I realized it wasn't just a memory or an illusion. It was here, lingering in the glow of the phone, almost extending its claws towards me. I felt the room darken, shadows curling around me once more. I stumbled back, dropping the phone, which crashed against the floor. The video continued playing, the voice growing louder and more demanding. Now filled with raw terror, I bolted for the door. My heart pounded like a war drum, screaming at me to escape. How could I have been so foolish? I raced down the hall towards the front door, desperate to breathe fresh air and escape the clutches of that haunting presence. But as I reached for the knob, it wouldn't turn. Panic coursed through me as I yanked at it, but it felt frozen in place. I banged my fists against the wood, calling for my family to help. I could hear their voices echoing in the other room, but it all felt so far away. "Open the door," I shouted, my voice thick with fear. "Please?" There was no answer, just the oppressive silence that clung to me like a cloak. I was alone, completely alone, trapped in this moment of terror. The shadow lurked behind me, breathing heavy like an animal ready to pounce. I could sense its breath chilling the air, making me shudder. Frantically, I glanced around for another way out. I spotted the window leading to the back porch. Maybe I could climb out and escape. As I turned, I saw the curtains fluttering as if beckoning me, luring me toward them. With a deep breath, I rushed toward the window, my heart racing even faster. I had barely managed to slide it open when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. They echoed in my mind, synchronized with my quickening heartbeat. I knew in that moment that whatever was left from last night had returned, seeking me in the daylight. The sensation paralyzed me. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the escalating sound, but it only intensified. The voice from the video whispered again, spilling into the room like smoke. "You're not leaving?" I screamed as I pushed through the window, scrambling down the side of the porch, my feet slipping on the wet wood. I landed hard on the ground, but I barely felt the pain as I stumbled to my feet. I had to get away. I had to run. I heard the door suddenly crash open behind me, the shadows spilling out as they surged to follow. There was no time to think. I sprinted across the backyard, the grass slick with morning dew, every step fueled by adrenaline. As I dashed toward the alley behind the house, I could hear the whispers getting louder, echoing all around me. I dared a glance back and my heart seemed to stop. The figure stood there, waiting just inside the porch light, dark and menacing against the bright house. Its smile twisted wickedly, that unnerving grin carving deeper into my mind. It pointed toward me as if daring me to run. I turned away, pushing myself harder, limbs heavy but driven by an instinct to survive. The alley felt endless, shadows stretching out to ensnare me as I bolted forward. My breath came in ragged gasps, panic lacing my movements. I could feel that presence closing in behind me. I needed to find a place to hide, somewhere safe. A small shed loomed ahead, its door slightly ajar and inviting. I darted inside, slamming the door behind me and falling against it, my heart hammering against my ribs. In the darkness of the shed, I gasped for air. My eyes adjusted slowly, revealing discarded tools and cobwebs that hung like curtains in a forgotten home. As I laid low, muffled whispers broke through the stillness. "You can't hide from me," came the taunting voice, echoing all around me, bouncing off the wooden walls. I pressed my hands over my ears, hoping the sound would go away, but it only grew louder, a cacophony that crashed over me like waves. Thoughts raced through my mind, the figure, the video, the voice. This was a nightmare I couldn't escape. No matter where I went, it would follow. Just then, I felt a cold breeze sweep through the cracks in the walls, chilling me to the bone. The whispers turned into laughter, mocking and sinister, wrapping around me like a shroud. I lifted my head, trying to see through the darkness, my heart pounding against the void. The door rattled with a soft thud, and I could see the outline of a shadow approaching the crack beneath the door, expanding and shifting like smoke. With a surge of primal fear, I scrambled back among the shadows of the shed, finding a small corner to crouch in, my breath shallow as I imagined its dark hand reaching inside. I could feel the air thickening, pressing down on me as the laughter echoed louder, the presence nearly tangible now, almost curling around me like an embrace. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Silence. I held my breath, straining to listen. Had it gone? Had I escaped? But just then, the laughter returned, low and haunting, echoing around me like a chilling lullaby. I felt the temperature drop, a frosty breath on my neck that made me shiver. I turned slowly, and there it was, an indistinct form standing just beyond the light of the door, visible in the shadows. "Did you really think you could get away?" It hissed softly, its voice like ice slicing through the stillness. My instincts kicked in, recognizing the danger. I couldn't let it win, I had to fight back. I reached for a nearby tool, a rusty wrench glinting in the dim light, hoping it would offer some sort of protection. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice stronger than I felt. The figure laughed again, the sound twisting and morphing, echoing off the walls. It floated closer, closer still, until I could see its eyes glaring through the darkness, a bottomless abyss glinting with delight. "Don't you understand? I'm part of you now," it sneered, its voice dark and slippery. "You open the door and I will always be here." With every ounce of courage, I swung the wrench wildly, but it went straight through the figure, hitting the wooden wall instead. I felt it, a wave of fear wash over me, gripping tighter as I realized my mistake. I needed to counter its hold over me, but how? I gathered myself, reminding myself of what I learned from those terrifying videos. I needed to confront the darkness, not hide from it. "You're a trick," I said, clutching the wrench tighter, holding my ground. "You're nothing without my fear." For the first time, the figure seemed to falter, its edges blurring, flickering in the dim light. I pressed on, forcing my voice to break through the haze. "Leave me," I shouted, the words pouring out, feeling like a cleansing wave sweeping through the dread that clung to me. In that moment, something shifted. The figure twisted and shrieked, a sound that shattered the heavy silence. It felt like I was shattering some barrier, some holding spell that tied us together. The laughter wrapped around me like chains, but I pushed through it. With a final thrust of strength, I willed myself not to fear, not to succumb. "You won't win this time," I cried, and the shadows roared back, swirling violently, crashing against the walls of the shed. I felt the air change, the heaviness lifting just a fraction as the figure screamed, losing its grip on me. Time stretched, seconds feeling like hours, but I wouldn't bow any longer. I wouldn't let it take me. I lunged towards the door, wrench in hand, flinging it open, and burst out into the daylight. Fresh air filled my lungs, a sweet relief wrapping around me like a protective shield. I stumbled into the open, the sun fierce against my skin, illuminating the shadows that had chased me for so long. But even as I stood there, bathed in light, I turned and saw the figure still lurking at the edges of the shed, watching me, lingering like a bad memory. I knew it wasn't over. The rain had returned, falling with a crispness that chilled the warm air. I began to back away slowly, my heart racing, feeling that the battle I thought I had won was merely a pause in the horror. That night, something had changed. I felt it in my bones, a truth buried beneath layers of fear. The storm whispered secrets in the wind, promising more to come. As I made my way back toward the house, I realized that I could no longer close my eyes to the darkness. I had to confront it, had to understand it. But in the back of my mind, I could already hear those whispers, taunting and teasing, luring me into the shadows waiting for the next storm. And I knew without a doubt, it was only the beginning. As I stepped back toward the house, I could feel that familiar weight pressing down on me, the shadows stretching long across the yard like fingers reaching to pull me back. Each footstep felt heavier than the last, the ground almost tugging at my feet, urging me to stop, to turn around. I gritted my teeth, refusing to give in. When I reached the porch, I took a moment to catch my breath, peering nervously back at the shed, half expecting the figure to lunge out and chase me again. The shrieks and laughter still echoed in my mind. I pushed the door open, stumbling inside, shutting it tight behind me. The sound of the latch clicking echoed like a final note after a long, creepy song. My family was in the living room, completely unaware of the chaos that had unfolded just moments before. They laughed, their voices warm and inviting, but all I could feel was the distance growing between us. I could never tell them what I had faced, what I was now carrying inside. If I did, they might look at me differently, like I was broken or crazy. I took a deep breath, deciding to act normal. I joined them, forcing a smile onto my face, while deep down, dread curdled in my stomach. But as we went through the motions of a normal Saturday, the atmosphere shifted. I noticed subtle changes. The lights flickered occasionally, a chill danced through the air, and shadows seemed to lean a little too close, creeping just enough to catch the corner of my eye. As night arrived, I felt the tension grow, a storm building not just outside but inside my very being. I could hear distant thunder rumbling in the distance, growing louder with each passing minute. Goosebumps prickled my arms as I glanced out the window. The sky shifted, dark clouds rolling in that looked angry and alive. Dinner felt like a strained performance. Every clatter of silverware echoed too sharply, conversations twisting into muffled whispers, hiding something sinister beneath the surface. I excused myself as soon as I could, retreating to the sanctuary of my room. The normal world felt like a facade, painted over the creeping menace settling in my mind. Alone in my room, I closed the curtains tightly, blocking out the flickering light of the oncoming storm. I sat on my bed, gripping my phone tightly, the memory of the video flashing back in my mind. The warning, the laughter, the voice that still lingered, would it come crashing back into my life again? The wind picked up outside, howling against the windows, rattling them like bones. I felt trapped again, a sense of suffocation enveloping me, pressing down like a heavy blanket. Suddenly, a loud boom of thunder erupted, shaking the walls, and I jumped at the sound. Then came the whispers. Right at that moment, they began to creep in, soft at first, like a gentle breeze. I'm here. I'm always here. I shut my eyes tight, clutching the bedsheets, wishing desperately for silence. Go away, I whispered, my voice barely rising above the sound of thunder. But rather than fading, the whispers grew louder, wrapping around me, filling the room. Why did you leave me? Why did you try to escape? They chanted, a chorus of voices, chilling and haunting, sending shivers down my spine. I opened my eyes, glancing around my room, looking for the source of the sound, but I was alone, at least on the surface. The space felt constricted, as if the corners were closing in around me. Shadows danced against the walls, flickering in and out like old film reel gone bad. I jumped to my feet, crossing to the door only to stop. The handle turned easily in my hand, but something stopped me from stepping out into the hall. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me, screaming that I shouldn't open that door. Instead, I glanced around my room, desperately searching for something to shield myself from the unknown. Then I noticed something strange. A small crack in the corner of the room just behind my dresser. It had never been there before. The shadows around it were deeper, darker, as if hiding secrets of their own. My curiosity piqued, I moved closer, kneeling to get a better look. As I peered inside, I could barely breathe. It felt as though the air shifted, thickening around me. My heart raced faster, each beat a warning. But what if it held answers? What if I could learn how to fight back against whatever dark force had invaded my life? I reached in slowly, trembling with unease. My fingers brushed against something cold and smooth. I pulled it out carefully, revealing an old, cracked mirror that shimmered faintly in the dim light. The surface was dirty, but it held an unnatural allure. I raised it, letting it catch the moonlight filtering through the curtains. As I looked closer, I felt an odd sensation wash over me, a pull, an urge to lean in. In the depths of the mirror, I didn't just see my reflection. The shadows behind me twisted and formed a dark landscape, a realm of swirling blackness. Shapes moved, shifting and twisting, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw the figure staring back at me, its grin wide and threatening. I jerked back, dropping the mirror, which shattered loudly against the floor. The pieces scattered like lost souls, glinting ominously. Panic surged through me, but before I could fully react, I heard a whisper, clear as day, cutting through the chaos. Now you've done it? The words wrapped around me like a vine, tight and constricting. From the fragments of the mirror came a thick fog, seeping out and curling around my feet. I stumbled back further, but the fog flowed like liquid shadows, chasing me into the corner of my room. Come play with me, it hissed, taking shape around me, blending with the darkness like an awful promise. I gasped and felt a surge of power enveloping me, overwhelming all my senses. I struggled against it, trying to break free, my breaths coming in shallow bursts. Let go, it coaxed, reaching out, elongating fingers crafted from the night. I fought against the panic threatening to consume me. You can't hurt me. I'm part of you. With a surge of adrenaline, I found clarity, a bright tiny spark inside the storm. No, I yelled, voice rising against the dark echoing it produced. You will not take me. The fog twisted violently, and the laughter morphed into rage, a low rumble like a beast awakening. I needed to wake up from this trance, break the hold it had over me. I thought about the power of light, everything good that fought against the dark. Go away. I shouted again, feeling the strength of my words echoing in the air, forcing the shadows to recoil. For a moment, I could see its form trembling, flickering as though my defiance cracked its hold on reality. But it fought back, surging toward me, creating a vortex of shadows that made the air spin. Your fear gives me strength. It screamed, and with that, everything shifted. The room distorted, the edges blurring, and I was thrown into darkness, spiraling down into an abyss where nothing felt solid. I summoned every ounce of willpower I had, trying to grip onto the fading light, yearning for rescue. "I am not afraid," I shouted, and for the first time I felt the power of my resolve pushing against it. The darkness twisted around me, attempting to smother me, but I refused to let go. I began to remember the strength that had surged within when I screamed at the figure before. The words were my weapon. Again I found my voice strong and steadfast. "You don't belong here. You will not claim my mind or my fear." In that moment, something sparked deep within me. I could feel the darkness shredding away, losing its grip, like sand dissolving beneath the crashing waves. I continued to shout, breathing in the light, forcing it to steal the air from the shadows swirling around me. "Leave. Just leave," I repeated fiercely, willing it to melt away, my voice louder and stronger, echoing against the whispering echoes that had haunted me. As I did, I felt the room shift once more, the weight of the darkness lifting, pulling back like a tide receding from the shore. The swirling sounds dwindled down, the laughter fading to mere echoes of the past. Suddenly, I was thrown backward, landing hard on my bed, gasping in shock. The air was lighter, still, and warm, a stark contrast from the chaos that had enveloped me just a moment before. I blinked rapidly, astonished that I was back in my room, the shadows receding to their corners, hiding once more. The mirror fragments lay scattered on the floor, but the oppressive feeling had melted away. I felt drained but victorious. I took a calming breath, knowing I'd confronted the darkness, but something lingered just outside my grasp. But as my thoughts settled, I hesitated. The challenge wasn't over. I could feel the storm growing outside, the rumble of thunder echoing like a warning. With a creeping realization, I knew that this time, I would have to prepare for whatever came next. As I lie on my bed, trembling from the experience, I felt that deep-seated pull tugging at me still, a reminder of the shadows that were forever entwined with my life. I would have to stay vigilant, not just for myself but for the fear waiting in the wings. The storm outside raged on, but in that moment, I swore to myself I wouldn't let it take me. I was ready to face whatever may now come with an unwavering resolve. And as I closed my eyes again, I heard the echoes of that laughter fading into a whisper. "Until next time." And I understood that shadows were merely pieces of light-forming stories, and I was the one who would decide how they unfolded. But even as I pressed my eyes closed against the darkness of my room, sleep refused to come. I rolled over, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins, my heart racing. Every creak of the house sounded amplified, louder than usual, echoing like a warning bell in the silence. The storm outside intensified, flashes of lightning illuminating my room in brief bursts, dancing in and out of shadows. Each time the thunder roared, I jumped, staring at the window as if something was waiting for me there. A twisted figure, perhaps, lurking just beyond the glass, eager to slip in when I least expected it. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, startling me from my thoughts. I reached for it, hoping to drown out the silence, but as I glanced at the screen, my heart nearly stopped. The notification was a video link, sent from an unknown number. The preview showed a flickering image, dark and warped, much like the mirror fragments scattered on my floor. Resisting fear's grip, I clicked it. The video began to play, and I instantly recognized the voice, cold and dripping with malice. It was the same mocking tone that had haunted me before, the same laughter that echoed in my nightmares. "Welcome back," it rasped, and I felt a chill sweep over me as the images unfolded. The screen showed a familiar scene, my backyard, captured from some hidden angle. My stomach turned as I watched myself in the background, trapped in the memory of that frantic run toward the shed. Then the camera shifted, showing the figure standing where I had seen it before, its form twisted and unrealizable, blending into the night. Its eyes glowed with a predatory hunger, the smile stretching impossibly wide. I couldn't tear my gaze away as the video stuttered, showing the figure lurching closer, the grass rustling as though it was alive, whispering secrets that only the night could understand. "I'm always watching," the voice echoed through the speakers, sending shivers down my spine. The video cut off abruptly, leaving me staring blankly at my screen, the sudden silence deafening. My room now felt even more claustrophobic, walls closing in as my mind raced. Was this just a sick joke? Or had the figure crossed the line from dream to reality? I tossed my phone aside, my pulse racing. I needed to act, anything but stay here waiting for it to come. I jumped from my bed and opened the door just a crack, peering into the dimly lit hallway. Empty. The house sighed around me, echoing thoughts of long-lost memories. But a sound caught my attention. There it was again, faint but clear, the softest of whispers, barely audible, like cool fingers brushing against my ear. "Come find me." My heart thundered, but it was strange too that curiosity drew me closer. I tiptoed down the hall, each step heavy with dread but fueled by the desire to understand the source of the voice. As I moved further away from the safety of my room, the whispers grew stronger, a soft chant coaxing me deeper into the house. Finally, I reached the living room, where the storm's light flickered through the windows, casting angled shadows that danced around me, taunting my fear. I halted, listening intently, hoping the whispers would lead me to something, anything that would bring closure to this nightmare. "Not here, here?" The voice directed me, and I felt a sudden thrill and terror envelop me. It emanated from the basement door, slightly ajar, darkness spilling out like ink dropping into water. The basement was a place I normally avoided. It held memories of clutter, dampness, and a sense of confinement. But the pull was undeniable now. I took a breath, clutching the banister tightly, mustering what courage I had left. As I descended the stairs, each step creaked beneath me, sending echoes into the unseen depths. I reached the bottom and felt the air grow heavy, infused with a musty scent that made my skin crawl. I squinted into the deepening shadows, and in the flickering light, something glinted near the far wall. An old mirror, much like the shards I had broken in my room. But this one stood whole and untouched, framed in rusted metal, adorned with symbols I didn't recognize. My breath hitched as I stepped closer. It was an unsettling sight, capturing the darkness in a way that felt alive, as though it pulsed with its own heartbeat. I reached out slowly, fingers trembling as they brushed against the surface. The moment my skin made contact, a surge of energy shot through me, and the world twisted around me. I saw flashes of my own memories tangled with dark images of unknown places and faces. The shadows danced erratically, alive with secrets waiting to be unraveled. "Step through," the voice whispered again, seductive and low, wrapping around me like a silk thread. I hesitated, glancing back up the stairs. I could still escape, but something deep within urged me to look closer. I took a deep breath and pressed my face against the glass, the surface cool against my skin. Suddenly the reflection changed. I no longer saw myself but scenes, faces twisted in fear, illuminated by flickering light. People I did not know, trapped in their own squalid realities, their eyes pleading for help. And then I saw it again, that figure lurking just behind, its twisted grin growing wider, watching the chaos unfold. I gasped, pulling back. "What is this?" I shouted into the void, my voice echoing back at me, muffled and distant. "You asked for answers," came the disembodied voice, cruel like ice. "And I will show you." With that, a rush of energy pulled me forward, yanking me toward the mirror again, too quickly to resist, my mind swirling with fear and confusion. I stumbled, feeling cold tendrils wrapping around me, dragging me through the glass as the world behind twisted and exploded into a kaleidoscope of shadows. My feet landed on solid ground, but it felt like I was standing in fog. Amid shimmers of darkness, a vast landscape unfurled before me, a haunting dreamscape filled with twisted trees, their branches stretching out like fingers trying to grasp anything they could find. In the distance, I could hear whispers and cries, the sounds threading through the air like ghostly wails. I turned, trying to see where I was, and found myself surrounded by dark figures, their shapes indistinct but their eyes glowing ominously. "Help us," they chanted, reaching out toward me with desperate hands. Fear flooded my senses as I backed away, recognizing that whatever had lured me here was now in control. I turned to run, but the panicked voices followed, echoing above the howling wind. "Don't leave us. You're one of us now." The ground beneath me shifted, the shadows warping and twisting, creating a maze that seemed to trap me. I could feel the figures closing in, the cold creeping into my bones. "No!" I screamed, the sound ripping from my throat as I summoned all my strength. I had to find a way out of this nightmare. I focused on pushing the wave of darkness behind me, gathering the little light I could find in this dismal place. "I will break this," I yelled, calling on every ounce of power within me. The shadows screamed, a chorus of rage that echoed across the landscape, but I pressed on, forcing myself to remember the reality I came from, the laughter of my family, the warm embrace of daylight. As I concentrated, bits of light began breaking through the clouds of darkness, illuminating the figures before me. They faltered, moaning in despair as glimmers of hope pierced through their despair. The whispers turned to howls, and I could see that the figures were nothing but lost souls, victims of their own fear. "Together!" I shouted, my voice stronger than before. reaching out to them. "We can fight this." The shadows recoiled, and suddenly, a wave of brightness enveloped me. I felt a connection igniting like a fire, setting my whole being ablaze. The more I concentrated on the light, the brighter it became, forcing the encroaching darkness to unravel. In a glorious burst, a light exploded from my heart, breaking the barrier that chained those poor souls to their fear. With every ounce of will, I saw their faces shift from despair to determination. I could feel their hope merging with mine, turning the tide. The darkness around us screamed, furious and wild, as we fought back together, pushing the malevolence away. I felt myself breaking free, every inch of tiredness evaporating as the shadows fought desperately against the force of unity. And suddenly the landscape began to shift again, swirling away until crackling shadows faded, releasing their tangled hold, revealing a path leading back to where it all began, the mirror now shattered behind me. With one last surge of energy, I turned and took a decisive step toward that light, ready to fight back whatever would come after me, whatever darkness threatened my existence. The whispers fell quiet, drowned by the rhythm of my own heartbeat, reminding me of the power within. As I stepped through the shards and into the light, there was a sense of finally breaking free. I collapsed onto the floor of my basement, gasping for air, reality flooding back in and the weight of fear lifted. But as I looked up, my heart sank. In the dim half-light, the figure stood there watching, grinning wide as ever. "You think you are free?" it taunted softly. I froze, realization consuming me. It wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. I locked my gaze with the figure standing at the edge of my vision, its grin stretching wider with each passing moment. It felt like an electric shock, freezing me in place, and my heart pounded erratically, wild with fear. I wanted to scream, to run, but the sensation of dread wrapped around me like a thick fog, paralyzing my every move. "Did you think you could escape me?" the figure hissed, its voice a twisted melody winding through the air, filling the basement with its icy charm. I could see its form shifting in the half-light, shadows curling and folding around it like smoke, blurring the edges of that sinister grin. The face was almost human but warped, twisting features that gave it a horrid appearance, each part a reflection of my darkest fears. I stumbled backward, my heart racing as I caught sight of the remnants of the mirror scattered across the floor, glinting in the dim light like shards of a broken soul. Those fragments had held my fears, but now they seemed muted, powerless against the looming darkness before me. The laughter echoed again, crisp and chilling, reverberating through the hollow space, an invitation into a world of nightmares. "You tried to fight me," it continued, its voice slithering through the air. "But now you belong to me. You are part of this darkness." I clenched my fists, struggling against the rising tide of despair that threatened to pull me under. "No," I managed to shout, gathering whatever courage remained. "I won't let you take me." With those words, I felt a flare of defiance, a flicker of light deep inside that refused to be extinguished. I glanced around, searching for anything that could serve as a weapon or a shield. That's when I noticed something caught in the shadows, a fragile piece of the mirror reflecting the dim beam of light from above. I lunged for it, grasping the smooth surface of the shard tightly in my hand as cold, dark energy surged around me. "Stay back," I yelled, holding the broken mirror piece like a talisman against the encroaching malevolence. For the first time, I sensed the fear in the figure's eyes, a flicker that momentarily replaced the arrogant grin. "You think that can hurt me?" it sneered, but the tremor in its voice gave away its uncertainty. The shadows flickered with doubt, a dissonance rippling through the darkness that surrounded it. I stepped forward, igniting every ounce of bravery I could muster. "I will break you," I declared, my voice steady and determined. With every ounce of focus, I raised the shard higher, channeling every glimmer of light I could remember. I conjured the images that brought warmth, my friends, moments of laughter and happiness, the sun illuminating the beautiful world outside. I began to chant the words of resilience, weaving them into the air, pushing against the shadows that threatened to consume me. The figure writhed, its form twisting and contorting as the light began to encroach. "You cannot escape your destiny," it screamed, an unholy fury cracking its voice. But I could feel the warmth spreading through the space, driving back the darkness that had seeped into my bones. Behind me, the basement walls shuddered, and the palpable energy began to grow. The whispers of the trapped souls filled the air, not begging anymore but joining my chant, a thunderous chorus rallying against the oppressive shadows. "Let us go," they urged, power rising between us, intertwined with my own determination. "Together," I shouted, feeling the connection strengthen, a red-hot anger ringing through my chest. The brightness of hope surged and the air crackled with energy, pushing the darkness toward the corners of the room, like water retreating from the shore. The figure shrieked, its form flickering like a dying flame, but just when I thought it would disappear, it lunged forward, fast as lightning, intent on reclaiming its hold. I swung the shard of glass, and the cold surface caught its shadowy form, rippling with a transient glow. I could feel its energy hit me like a gust of wind, icy and suffocating, wrapping around my throat. I gasped, but from deep inside, the warm light surged once more, refusing to be snuffed out. I fought against the chill, pushing with every ounce of willpower I could find, breaking free from its suffocating grip. "Your fears are your own," it shrieked, clawing at the light, but I was relentless, the mirror shard blazing with the energy of unity. "You won't take us," I shouted, a shout that seemed to peel back the layers of darkness. Suddenly, the figure halted, its face shifting between rage and uncertainty, as if the reality of my defiance had thrown it off balance. "You're playing a dangerous game," it muttered, eyes narrowing in calculation, searching for a weakness. I took a deep breath, feeling empowered. "I will not be your puppet," I declared, and with that, a wave of light burst forward from the shard, dispelling the shadows surrounding me, washing over the figure like a radiant tide. It recoiled, shrieking as the brightness began to consume it, illuminating the entire basement in a blinding glow. The walls shook violently, cracks spiderwebbing across the surface as the reality around me began to unravel. I could feel the warmth of light seeping into every corner of my soul, filling the space with hope and resilience. But in the chaos, the figure reached out, fingertips brushing against my arm in a last desperate attempt to pull me back into the abyss, its voice hissing low, "You can't escape the dark within you." A sudden jolt rocked my frame, knocking me from my feet as shadows lashed out, wrapping around my legs, anchoring me in place. I struggled against them, the tendrils clutching me like iron chains, but they slipped through my fingers, taunting and mocking me. I felt panic rising anew as the figure regained its composure, advancing slowly, gloating over my faltering resolve. "You think this is only about light?" It licked its lips, eyes glinting with sinister delight. "You're mistaken. Fear is what binds us. You're going to need me to survive." It raised a twisted hand, beckoning shadows that snaked across the floor like living creatures desperate to consume the light. The chill wrapped around me, sinking deep into my skin, and the basement walls began to close in again. "Do you want to know what happens when the light fades?" It whispered, the sinister melody curling around my thoughts. "It's more fun in the dark." Shudders ran through me at those words. I could feel the weight of dread pressing against my chest. I knew it wanted to drag me deep into shadows once more to feed on my fears. But as I looked around, I saw the energy of the light pulsating, refusing to back down. In my heart, I understood that as long as I held on to it, I would not falter. With a surge of defiance, I raised the shard of glass again, this time with renewed strength. "I choose light," I shouted, and the shard gleamed in response, lighting up the room as if igniting its very essence. The figure wrinkled its brow, clearly taken aback, but I pressed on, my voice firm, unyielding. "I will not let you win. I am stronger than you'll ever understand." The energy crackled dangerously, spinning around me, and as I focused my thoughts on every moment of bravery I had ever felt, the shadows began to recoil again. I felt the warmth radiate from within, like sun breaking through storm clouds, creating a powerful pulse that pushed against the darkness trying to engulf me. "Fight it," I shouted as the brightness grew, illuminating the chaos, restoring what had always belonged to me. The shadows twisted and churned, desperate to hold on, but the light was relentless, searing through the tendrils like a knife. Suddenly, the figure lunged again, angry and desperate, but this time I was ready. I held my ground, feeling the light course through me, and I thrust the shard forward. The air shimmered, and an explosion of energy burst from the glass, flooding the room with blinding luminosity, slashing across the figure's form. It shrieked, a cry of agony that echoed through the basement, reverberating off the walls. The shadows split apart, evaporating like mist under the sun, leaving behind the faintest whispers of dread. But even as I rejoiced in my victory over the darkness, I felt a faint twinge of uncertainty. It was a game, a battle for control in a war that had only just begun. The figure began to dissolve, the once distinctly sinister features twisting into something formless, yet I felt its presence linger, a promise that it would return. And as I stood there, grasping the broken shard tightly, I understood that light and dark were intertwined. This fight was not just for me but for each soul caught in the shadows. I had to continue this fight, knowing deep down that the next encounter would be even more twisted than the last. I would need to be prepared, to harness the light within me and protect myself against the darkness that was relentless. As I looked around the basement, light flickered softly, illuminating the remnants of my struggle. "Next time," I whispered, trying to summon courage. "Next time I will be ready." But lurking in the corners of my mind was a nagging fear, a shadow of doubt whispering that perhaps I had not seen the last of the sinister figure or the darkness that seemed to haunt me. The storm outside rumbled again, and I knew that a tempest was brewing not only in the skies but in the very realms that blurred the lines between our realities. And as the silence settled, I dared to hope that within me lay the strength to keep fighting, even if the darkness would always seek to claim me. Days turned into a blur after that encounter, an unsettling feeling nestling deep inside me, reminding me that the battle wasn't truly over. I found myself stealing glances at the basement door every time I passed, lingering in the hallway just a moment longer than necessary. Each creak of the old house felt like a taunt, a reminder of the shadows that lived just below the surface. I tried to resume my normal life. I went to school, hung out with friends, and laughed at jokes. But every time the wind rattled the windows or thunder rolled in the distance, dread curled in my stomach like a snake wrapping around its prey. The stormy nights became a time of reckoning, where I sat in bed, clutching the remnants of that mirror shard like a lifeline. I felt as though I was living in two worlds, one of light during the day and the other of suffocating darkness at night. It was one such stormy night when the feeling intensified. The thunder rumbled like a warning bell, shaking the foundation of my house, yet it was the quiet that settled in afterward that made my skin prickle. The air grew still, too still. And then came a soft whisper, wrapped in the shadows, flickering at the edges of my consciousness. "You can't hide from me." It was the same voice, smooth like ink, but more sinister now, as if it had grown stronger in the dark. I fought to keep my composure. "Leave me alone." I yelled into the emptiness of my room, hoping to dispel the creeping dread. But the shadows danced invitingly along the walls, twisting and curling like tendrils stretching toward me. I could swear the air grew colder with every breath I took, as if an unseen presence suffocated the warmth of the world outside my window. Then the lights flickered, casting long, ominous shadows on the floor. I could feel the pulse of something ancient and ominous behind them, like a heartbeat of the house itself. I backed away from the shadows, retreating until my back hit the wall, breath hitching as I held onto the shard tightly. "Show yourself," I demanded, but the only reply was the mocking laughter echoing in my ears, a long, haunting sound that slithered in and out of my thoughts. And then, with a suddenness that made my heart leap, the basement door creaked open on its own, revealing a gaping maw of darkness that beckoned me. What was once merely a door now felt like a gateway to my deepest fears. I knew I should run, but something drew me closer, an irresistible pull that urged me down the stairs. It felt like the pause before a storm, a heartbeat away from chaos, and I could hear the whispers intensifying, becoming a symphony of despair. Summoning every ounce of bravery that remained, I stepped towards the door. Each step felt like I was wading into a thick fog, the damp chill wrapping around me as I descended into the gloom. My heart raced, drumming loudly in my ears like a warning bell, but I couldn't stop now. I needed to confront whatever lingered down there. As I reached the bottom, I found the basement had transformed. The remnants of my previous battle had faded into an unsettling backdrop, walls coated in a dark, viscous substance that gleamed ominously under the dim light. The mirror fragments now lay scattered like bones, glittering shards reflecting a fractured reality I no longer recognized. In the center of the room stood a figure, an echo of the one I'd encountered before, but now it was cloaked in darkness, its features shrouded and undefined. I felt the air grow thick, and my breath caught in my throat as it spoke again, voice a serpentine hiss. "Welcome back. Did you miss me?" I clenched the shard tightly, my knuckles white with fear. "Get away from me," I shouted, but my voice faltered, sounding weak in the suffocating dark. The figure stepped closer, the edges of its form blurring as if reality struggled to keep it in place. "You've come to play," it whispered, a smile lingering on its lips, but it was a smile devoid of warmth, a promise of torment. "But you, like all others, will see how futile it is to fight." Without warning, the darkness warped and lunged, taking shape as shadowy tendrils that crept toward me, swirling around my feet, pulling me into an abyss of chill. I fought against the grip, feeling emotions flood in, panic mixed with an anger I hadn't felt before. I was not going down easily. With a yell fueled by desperation, I swung the shard again, and it sliced through the air like a comet, catching the figure's arm. A high-pitched screech erupted, sounding like glass breaking underfoot, and for a moment the shadows recoiled, retreating from the light that edged from the shard. It was a flicker of hope, but I knew I had to act swiftly. More powerful than your fear. I screamed, gathering energy that swirled in my heart, willing light to follow. You're just a shadow. You feed on despair. The shadows writhed in agony, pulling back. You think you understand the darkness? The anguish, the terror? I could feel the heat rising from the shard, and within that warmth, I found clarity. I am not afraid of you, I declared, pushing against the grip of the shadow vines rapidly tightening around my wrists. They felt icy and unyielding, but a fire sparked deep inside me, fueled by all the moments I had cherished. The room trembled as I focused that fire into a vivid memory, the time I had felt most alive, laughing with friends under the stars, the joy pushing at the boundaries of dark. I called upon it, summoning the brightness that erupted from within me, and I could feel the light expand, pushing against the cold shadows, forcing them back. The figure screamed again, a discordant sound that echoed throughout the basement, rattling the very foundations of the walls. The shadows shrank before my brilliance, breaking and dissolving like mist under the morning sun. But as I pressed forward, I realized the figure wasn't merely dissolving, it was transforming. Shadows twisted and formed into faces, twisted reflections of everyone I knew, friends, family, people I'd lost. Look at what you're losing, they called, their voices distorted, merging into one haunting chorus that gripped my heart with fear and despair. I faltered, uncertainty creeping into my resolve. I knew they weren't real, just manifestations of my anxiety, but the anguish in their expressions felt hauntingly real. Join us, they beckoned, their hands reaching through the veil of shadows toward me. You don't have to fight alone. Stop it. You're not them. I shouted, gripping the shard, the light pulsating fiercely. But their faces twisted, morphing into grotesque parodies as the figure cackled, its shadowy form electrified with dark energy. Wouldn't you prefer the comfort of despair? Join us. The basement festered with dark energy, the shadows stretching out, creeping toward my heart. I could feel them tugging at my memories, wanting to root me in despair, but I shook my head fiercely, drawing back, refusing to let those shadows take hold. No, I screamed, forcing my voice against the tide of darkness. You will never take me. Not now. Not ever. And with that, I thrust the shard into the center of the shadowy vortex, light bursting forth in a blinding flash. It erupted like fireworks in the cold air, expanding and swallowing the shadows whole, banishing their anguished faces as they dissolved into mere whispers. The figure shrieked in rage, writhing in the light, but the brightness was relentless. I felt the shadows tearing, fraying like old fabric as they struggled to hold their form. I concentrated, calling upon every ounce of hope and will inside me. I wouldn't let this entity claim my heart. You have no power here. I bellowed, my voice ringing out stronger than I had ever felt. The vibrations shook the walls, and just as the figure squirmed, I pressed forward, pushing the shard deeper into the heart of darkness, pulling everything into the light. In an electric moment, the shadows exploded outward, forming a stunning burst of brilliance that filled the entire basement. The figure let out a guttural roar, an amalgamation of fury, pain, and despair, as it was engulfed, flushed away by the violent tide of luminosity. The energy wrapped around me, pulling me into an embrace of light, lifting me above the chaos. But still, I could feel the presence of the dark entity, a weight that would never fully leave me. As the remnants of shadows lifted, I landed back on solid ground, panting as the basement returned to its haunted stillness. For a moment, silence enveloped me, the weight of the battle settling heavily in my chest. I looked around, breathing in the remnants of my struggle. The mirror shards lay scattered but devoid of the oppressive energy that had haunted them before. Yet I knew, even in victory, this fight wasn't over. I could still hear it lingering, a distant echo of laughter mingling with the wind outside, an assurance that it would return. I steadied myself, understanding fully what it meant to face my fears. I wouldn't be alone in this fight. I would channel the strength of those I loved, their memories and their light. Searching for a way to protect myself, I knew that with each passing encounter, I would learn, adapt, and come back stronger. As I took the first step back toward the stairs, I felt a thrill of resolve. I stepped out of the basement, closing the door behind me, and I promised myself I would never let that darkness find me again. The ordeal had forged something new within me, a connection that would shield me even in the depths of despair. Yet as I turned to walk away, I caught a glimpse of the floor behind me, where shadows slithered once more in the absence of my light, whispering soft promises that sent chills down my spine. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart, but my legs felt like jelly. I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched, an unsettling sensation that crawled over my skin like tiny insects. Every inch of me screamed to leave, yet my feet refused to move. As I stood there, my eyes darted nervously around the basement, taking in the remnants of our last battle. The air was thick with an eerie silence, laced with tension that pressed down hard against my chest. It was as if the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. Then the temperature dropped. I could see my breath fogging up in front of me and a cold draft cut across the room. Goosebumps prickled my arms as I focused on the shadows, which seemed to grow darker, swirling together like an angry storm. They began to pulse and writhe, twisting into forms that felt familiar yet entirely grotesque. I stumbled back against the wall, my mind racing with panic. "This can't be happening again," I whispered, reminding myself that I had faced it before. But no matter how I tried to steady my thoughts, the feeling of dread washed over me in waves. My hand tightened around the shard, still glowing faintly in the dimness, a fragile lifeline in a sea of despair. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a soft breeze carrying secrets. "You can't hide," they urged, voices layering over each other, each one a mixture of pleading and threatening. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing them to stop, wanting the cacophony to fade away, but it only got louder, drowning out my thoughts. Then a figure emerged from the shadows, stepping forward. This one was different, more defined than before, its shape dripping with darkness. I squinted, trying to see through the heavy veil that cloaked it. This wasn't the previous entity. It felt more powerful, like an echo of something ancient. "Don't you remember me?" it hissed, a chill running through me at the sound of its voice. It was deeper, resonating through the air, sending vibrations through the walls. My heart raced, a wild drumbeat in my chest. I couldn't recall ever having met this darkness, yet it felt like it knew me all too well. The shadows flickered around its form, forming faces that twisted in agony, each one a reflection of every fear I had buried deep inside. "I'll take you back to the abyss," it continued, white teeth shining against the thick darkness, that grin stretching wider, hungry for fear. The basement began to shake, the ground vibrating beneath my feet. I felt as if the house itself was alive, responding to the entity's presence. I wanted to run, to escape to the safety of the outside world, but the shadows shifted, blocking my path. The walls seemed to close in, constricting like a snake tightening around its prey. "Fight me if you dare," it taunted, the confidence seeping into its tone. Desperation clawed at my throat. I could feel the malevolence radiating from it. The air grew heavy with a sense of crushing despair. I knew I had to stand my ground, but terror pressed against my chest like an iron weight. So, I took a step forward, forcing my voice to remain steady. "I won't let you win," I declared, though I felt small against the enormity of it. It leaned in closer, and the stench of decay filled my nostrils, making me gag. This proximity felt dangerously intimate, its breath cold and heavy against my skin. "Your resolve is charming," it replied, eyes glinting like black diamonds. "But you will break. They always do." I could feel the dread pooling in my stomach as the shadows coiled closer, whispering horrifying secrets of my past. They conjured images of failure, of loneliness, of all the moments when I had felt powerless. I shook my head, denying their hold over me. I'd fought too hard to allow these memories to drag me down. In a flash of clarity, I remembered why I had fought in the first place. My friends, my family, the light that glowed within those memories. I raised the mirror shard, and a surge of warm energy coursed through me, illuminating the creeping shadows. "I choose to fight for them," I shouted, desperation and hope colliding in my voice. Light poured from the shard, pushing back against the encroaching shadows. The figure shrieked, a discordant sound that clawed against my mind. I felt the glowing warmth envelop me, wrapping around my body like a protective cocoon, but the shadows around the figure churned violently, refusing to fade. Their screams melded into a terrifying orchestra, drowning out my own thoughts, creating an overwhelming cacophony that threatened to swallow me whole. "You think you can escape this cycle?" it jeered, its smile broadening, sharper than steel. "You will always return. You are forever trapped in the dark." "No," I cried out, channeling every ounce of courage I held, my heart pounding like thunder. "You don't own me." I thrust the shard into the ground at my feet, a fierce light erupting from its core, spiking upward like the tendrils of a fire, illuminating the basement until shadows melted into nothingness. But even as I fought back, I could feel the figure lurch back, reforming itself as I pushed forward. You think this is the end? It's only the beginning, it roared, its voice rising above the dazzling light, buffeting me with chaotic energy. The room spun around me, swirling in a cyclone of light and darkness, blurring the lines between what was real and what was a nightmare. And then everything went dark. The light flickered out unexpectedly, plunging me into an abyss so complete, it stole the air from my lungs. Panic surged in my chest as I twisted around, trying to find the light, trying to remember where I had come from. My heart hammered against my rib cage, echoing in the void. Shadows curled around me, slithering forward as if tasting my fear, inching closer with breathless anticipation. I couldn't see, couldn't think, couldn't. With a burst of will, I lifted my arm, grasping blindly for the shard, and as soon as my fingers brushed its cool surface, light exploded back to life in a golden flash, illuminating the endless dark around me. All at once, the shadows paused, their ugly forms retreating just a step as if recognizing the power radiating from me. I took a hesitant step forward, the warmth of the shard reassuring against the icy tendrils curling at my feet. Enough! I yelled, feeling a newfound conviction fill my voice. You will not claim me. Every time you try, I will rise stronger. The figure, now barely discernible in the bright light, simply laughed. You do not understand. You think you can fight me? I am the darkness that will never fade. I will always return. The laughter echoed ominously as every ounce of confidence plummeted in my chest. Yet I refused to be cowed. You will not take my spirit. You will not win. I shouted back, forcing the light to intensify around me, feeding it with every memory of hope that flickered in my mind. In my heart, I could feel the presence of my loved ones, giving me strength. The darkness stirred violently, the shadows shrieking with rage as they swept through the room, attempting to engulf me. But I pushed forward, ready to fight once more. The shard blazed in my hand like a star that had come alive, becoming a beacon against the shadows. I am more than your fear. I screamed, thrusting the shard out in front of me. The light burst forth like sunshine breaking through clouds, pushing back the onslaught of blackness that threatened to swallow me whole. I poured every bit of strength I had left into forging an impenetrable barrier of light, a shield I hoped would chase the shadows into oblivion. And as the light radiated out, the figure howled in rage, its form thrashing, flickering, and wavering under the exposure to my radiant energy. But the shadows didn't vanish. They continued to cackle and writhe, and just as I thought I had found victory, the room began to distort again, everything swirling violently around me. No, I shouted, feeling the world shift beneath my feet, a reminder that I was still in a precarious battle. You will not take me. But shadows began to envelop me anew, each tendril whispering cruel promises, dragging me into a memory I had desperately tried to escape. This time they weren't merely conjuring images. I was being pulled back to moments where sadness and regret festered. I could hear my past selves echoing through the darkness, those times when I felt alone, when fear gripped me so tightly I could barely breathe. Their voices layered over one another, a haunting chorus reminding me of where it all began, the failures and the fears that formed the very essence of my being. Why fight? You know you can't win, they echoed. You will always be weak, always be alone. I felt the weight of their words settling into my bones, threatening to crush the newfound light as I struggled against the relentless tide. The darkness seemed to pulse with an energy that felt more powerful each time I faced it, and with every flicker of hope, it clouded my mind, bringing back memories I wished to forget. And just when I felt the shadows grasping me, threatening to drag me back into the abyss, I clutched the shard tightly, calling upon every spark of joy I could find, every moment that illuminated my life. These would be my anchors. Remember the laughter, I breathed, forcing my eyes open as the shadows closed in. Remember the love. I could feel their warmth coursing through me, a light shimmering inside, begging to break free. With a surge of determination, I raised the shard high, rallying the light within. You don't belong here, I shouted. You are not me. The shadows shrieked, a chorus of tortured screams erupting into the air as I released the energy stored within. Light erupted from the shard like a supernova, spreading across every inch of the darkness, swallowing it whole, radiating through the basement until it was nothing but a void. Pain shot through me, but I held strong, feeling the heat, the energy, expanding outward, pushing back against the endless dark. But then came the familiar weight of the figure pressing in, its chaotic laughter merging with the darkness, a reminder that this was not truly over. You will never escape, it roared, fury coursing through its voice, mixing with the oppression of shadows that lurked, always waiting, always watching. I knew in my gut that this wasn't the end. Each time I fought, I would only gather more strength, but also more darkness. And so, as the shadows faded back into the corners of my mind, I stepped, weary but resolute. Looking down at the glowing shard, I promised myself that I would keep fighting. I would face the dark again. I would be ready next time. And this time, I was determined to break the cycle. Every battle prepares me for the real war against the shadows that trail behind, lurking just outside the light. I would be ready next time. And this time, I was determined to break the cycle. After the light faded, I stood there trembling, the warmth of the shard still pulsing in my grasp. I could feel the echoes of fear washing away, but that unsettling silence returned, creeping over me like a blanket. What now? I thought, glancing around the basement. Shadows still lurked in the corners, as if waiting for the moment I let my guard down again. The air felt thick, a heavy blanket that pressed against my chest, squeezing tight. I backed away slowly, wary of the creeping darkness that threatened to wrap around me once more. Suddenly, a cold gust rushed through the basement as if a door had flown open. I turned, heart racing, but there were no windows, no escape. Just the walls that seemed to close in tighter with every passing second. Cold sweat trickled down my back and I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling more vulnerable than ever. Then I noticed a flicker out of the corner of my eye, disembodied shapes darting in and out of the darkness, echoes of the past. Shadows that looked like old friends lost in time. They twisted and morphed, taking on faces I recognized. They weren't just figments of my imagination. They were memories, fragments of laughter and love, twisted into something grotesque and wicked. "Why are you back?" I whispered, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I couldn't understand why they were here now, what they wanted from me. I wanted to run, but the fear held me in place, rendering me a statue caught in a moment of panic. The shapes drew closer, each face now a mask of torment, eyes wide and pleading. "You can't escape," they chorused in chilling unison, their voices high and thin, like the wind slipping through a cracked window. "You belong to the shadows." I shuddered violently, the words echoing inside my mind, wrapping around my thoughts like chains. "No," I shouted, but it felt small and weak. "I am not yours." Suddenly, the air became electrified, charged with an unseen energy. The shadows surged forward in a wave, pulling the air from my lungs, drowning me in their collective despair. I could feel the anguish and sorrow tearing at my heart, each memory brushing against my skin like a chilling caress. Ghostly fingers gripped my wrists, squeezing tighter until I felt like I was being pulled apart. "Join us," they cried in a cacophony, voices swirling like a tempest. "You don't have to fight anymore. Let us pull you down, back to the safety of the dark." In that moment, panic gripped me. Empathy tugged at my heart, pooling in that familiar pit of despair. I could feel my resolve wavering as the shadows beckoned me toward darkness, their whispers promising peace. I raised the shard instinctively, but the energy within it flickered like a dying flame. "No, not now," I thought, panic rising. Suddenly, twisting shadows enveloped the shard, and a horrible sensation crawled over me as if it were draining all the warmth, every ounce of light, away from me. In a desperate move, I broke free, pulling my arms away and swinging the shard in a wide arc. The light erupted, banishing the encroaching darkness, but it left me feeling exposed, vulnerable to the next wave of shadows waiting outside the brilliance. "Keep fighting," I told myself, focusing on the warmth of the memories that could strengthen me. I thought of laughter shared, moments spent, the sunlight filtering through trees, and the warmth of a friend's embrace. And then I realized the shadows were right. The past would always haunt me. They weren't just memories, they were pieces of me that were broken and scattered. Yet I had something they didn't, the will to keep moving forward, to seek out the light. The whispers faded slightly, but a new fear crept in as I noticed the shadows shifting again. They gradually morphed into new forms, things I had never imagined before. The walls of the basement groaned ominously, and the flickering light began to dim. My eyes widened in horror as dark figures began to swirl from the corners, grotesque silhouettes rising up like phantoms from an ancient tomb. Each shape twisted until it resembled a distorted version of something I recognized. Horrified, I recognized one face among them, a friend I hadn't seen in years. "Why are you doing this?" I choked out, desperately clutching the shard as if it could anchor me to reality. My heart thudded heavily in my chest as their blank eyes bore into mine, hollow and searching. "Don't you remember us?" it asked softly, almost tenderly, a sickly sweetness coloring its tone that turned my stomach. "You can be one of us again. You don't have to fight this." "No?" I screamed, shaking my head violently, my grip on reality slipping. The basement felt alive with whispers that intertwined with my own fading courage, pulling and tugging until I felt like I might shatter. I stumbled backward, my feet barely holding me up as panic surged within me. But then I took a deep breath, remembering the shard in my hand. I focused every fiber of my being into that glowing light, pouring strength and hope into the core as I held it high, like a shield against the encroaching nightmare. "Go away," I shouted, forcing the energy to burst forth. And with that, light exploded in a cascade, filling the basement as shadows recoiled, shrieking in terror. But the moment the warmth touched them, a new, darker presence broke free. A larger figure twisted from the shadows, looming over me like a storm cloud. It was more menacing than before, a creature forged from my deepest fears. Its eyes glowed a sickly green, hungry and piercing, locking onto me with terrifying intensity. "Enough of this foolishness," it growled, a voice like thunder. The ground shuddered beneath me and I took a shaky step back, feeling small and insignificant. Chills raced down my spine as I stared at it, paralyzed with uncertainty. "Join the darkness and you'll find peace," it continued, voice dripping with malice, a cruel smile splitting its face, revealing teeth like daggers. "You cannot win. This is my domain and you are mine." The shadows surged around me again, and I felt their weight crushing down, relentless and consuming. Memories, fears, and the faces of lost friends began to swirl together like a storm, mingling with my own despair. It became harder to breathe. Anxiety clawed at my mind, reframing the light and twisting it into something dark and terrible. The figures began to whisper again, bringing with them echoes of sorrow. "You're all alone," they hissed. "Embrace us, we will keep you safe." I couldn't let myself listen. Not again. I shut my eyes tight, concentrating on the shard's light, summoning every ounce of courage as I shouted back, "No, you won't have me. I will fight." Daylight memories flickered through my mind, when I had smiled and felt loved. They energized me, pulsing with strength deep inside me. The shard became a beacon of brightness, surging against the oppressive power threatening to engulf me. Sucking a breath, I thrust the shard forward, feeling the surge of light burst forth like a tidal wave crashing against the dark. The glow engulfed the shadows, forcing their grotesque forms to writhe and shriek in retaliation. But the larger figure held fast, its laughter rumbling through the basement, chilling me to the bone. "You think you can threaten me with light?" it taunted, its form shifting and swirling. "I have existed long before you were born, and I shall persist long after you are gone." Its words echoed in my mind, shattering my courage momentarily. But deep down, amidst my wavering faith, a flicker of resilience ignited. I realized the truth of its words. I didn't need to defeat it. I just needed to persist, to keep fighting and find a way to escape its grasp. With renewed strength surging through me, I concentrated on the light within the shard, letting it envelop everything. "You are weak," I cried out, my voice solid and unyielding. "I am strong enough to carry this, to carry my past. You will never be my master." As I plunged the shard again into the ground, it erupted into a brilliant display of light, radiating in every direction, shattering the darkness like fragile glass. Each burst seemed to damage the very fabric of the shadows that clawed at me, unraveling their grip and forcing them back. Yet, just as I thought victory was at hand, I felt a sharp pain at my side. Something had cut through the brilliance, a sharp edge of cold that froze my breath. I turned to see the larger figure lashing out with sharpened fingers, and I realized too late that its grasp still lingered. The light flickered, threatening to fade just as I rose to confront it. Behind me, I could hear the whispers grow guttural, turning into a chaotic wail. "You cannot run from what is inside you. You will always belong to us." And in that moment of pure terror, I realized this battle wasn't just about the shadow in the basement. It was about everything I carried, the fears, the memories, the pain. With every ounce of will, I steadied myself once more, knowing this was why I had to keep fighting. This was just the beginning, and I could still learn how to find my way in the dark. With a bright resolve, I closed my eyes, focusing inward again as the darkness loomed larger, snarling, ready for the next onslaught. "Bring it on," I whispered to the shadows, preparing myself for the fight ahead. No matter where this journey would take me, I would always be ready to rise again. With a bright resolve, I closed my eyes, focusing inward again as the darkness loomed larger, snarling, ready for the next onslaught. I could feel the shadows shifting around me, their whispers growing sharper, each syllable like a knife cutting through my thoughts. "You're just one person," they hissed in unison, voices slithering into my ears. "One frail flicker against us. You're nothing compared to the darkness of your own heart." I shook my head, trying to drown out their cruel words, but they wormed their way into my mind. While the pain at my side throbbed painfully, I forced my eyes open, determined to face the larger figure that loomed before me, its sickly green eyes boring into my soul. I could see its mouth stretch into a twisted smile, as if savoring the fear that pulsed through the air like a fog surrounding us. "You think this light makes you strong? You are merely delaying the inevitable," it growled, advancing toward me, shadows snapping at my heels. I stumbled back, clutching the shard tightly, feeling the warmth of its light gradually fading. I sensed my grip loosening, the brightness flickering like a dying flame, and the darkness seemed to sense this weakness. I had to act fast. Summoning every ounce of courage, I shouted, "No, you will not take me." The basement shifted beneath me, warped by the power of my declaration. The walls seemed to close in as if they were alive, stretching toward the shadows, eager to embrace them. Panic coursed through me, but I pushed forward, thrusting the shard into the ground with all my strength. "Light, guide me," I yelled, urging the warmth within the shard to grow. As if obeying my command, the light shot out in all directions, illuminating the grotesque shapes of the shadows surrounding me. For a moment, I felt invincible, like nothing could touch me. But the figure drew closer, its laugh echoing like thunder, an ominous reminder that it was not finished yet. "You cannot stand against the tide," it snarled, the air crackling with rage and despair. "You will fail." Just then, I felt an icy grip around my ankle, a dark tendril that coiled tighter and tighter. I glanced down, horror flooding my system. The shadows were reaching for my legs, pulling me down into the encroaching darkness that seemed eager to swallow me whole. "Don't let them!" I screamed inward, fighting against the pull. With force, I ripped my foot free, but the sensation left me shaken, like ice water was soaking through my bones. "Join us," they pleaded in a disjointed chorus, their voices rising and falling like a tide. I could feel dread wrapping around my heart, choking me. I wanted to give in, to sink into the shadows. It felt comforting in a twisted way, to belong to something greater than myself. But deep down, a small spark screamed that I couldn't let them win. I grasped the shard tightly, glancing at its soft, warm glow, and realized I still had a choice. "I can choose the light," I called out, drawing strength from the memories clinging to my heart. I focused on the love and friendship that had sustained me through life's trials. It wasn't just about fighting the shadows, it was about holding on to what mattered. With renewed energy, I swung the shard through the air, letting its light flow outwards, and raged against the darkness. The larger figure lunged forward, snarling, as shadows whipped hungrily around it, but I would not let fear tether me anymore. "You have no power over me," I shouted, the ground trembling beneath our feet. In that instant, I felt it, a wave of warmth radiating from the glow, battling against the cold grasp of the shadows. The darkness recoiled, cries of frustration erupting as I pressed forward. "Get away from me," I bellowed, unleashing all the strength and love I could muster. The air charged with crackling energy, swirling between us as the light intensified around me, shrinking the shadows that had once felt so insurmountable. Suddenly, the walls of the basement began to crack, light spilling through the fractures like fireflies escaping a jar. The shadows shrieked in agony, their forms twisting and stretching in the brightness, disintegrating like mist under the sun. I could see the larger figure losing its shape, shattering into nothingness, leaving behind a chilling echo of its laughter that echoed in the depths of my mind. In one final surge, I thrust the shard down hard, sending a shockwave of golden light ripping through the room. Everything fell silent as shadows flared and twisted out of existence, leaving only a soft whisper in their wake. The basement shuddered one last time before the darkness unraveled, leaving nothing but a faint glow flickering in the stillness. I exhaled deeply, every breath filled with relief. Somehow, I felt lighter, as if I had shed a heavy cloak draped over me. The scars of fear and doubt, the weight of lost things, began to fade into the air, like a fog lifting with the dawn. And as I stared around, the once terrifying space transformed. What was once ominous now felt warm and inviting, the air crisp with a sense of freshness, like spring after a long winter. I realized I had not only faced the shadows but had truly broken free from their grip. Though I knew the darkness would always exist, I also understood that I could find my way back to the light. I had the power within me to choose, to fight, and to rise again whenever they tried to return. With a final look at the shard, still glowing gently in my hand, I smiled, knowing this was just one battle won on a long journey ahead. And so, I walked out of the basement, heart lighter, a deep determination now coursing through my veins. It was my life, my light, and I would never let the darkness swallow me again.